I used to believe the people around me, believe that success only looked one way. Clean suit, 9 to 5 benefits, maybe a yearly cruise to Jamaica, if you were really lucky. That's what they told me. That's what they mocked me for not wanting. My name's Daniel Carter. I'm 29 now, but back when this story started, I was 21, standing behind the counter of a hardware store in Cedar Grove, Pennsylvania. A town so small, if someone sneezed on Main Street, 3 people on the next block would say, "Bless you." I lived in a studio apartment above the store. The walls were thin, and the heater coughed like a dying animal. But it was mine. And even then, even when my weekly paycheck barely covered food and rent, I had a dream that wouldn't shut up. I wanted to create a sustainable clothing line. Yeah, I know. Sounds like every other 20-something on TikTok these days. But back then, especially in a town where Carhartt jackets were worn to work and not Instagrammed, that dream made me a joke. And no one laughed harder than the people closest to me. "You trying to sew pants in your bedroom now?" Eric chuckled, sipping a Bud Light on his porch. "I'm learning the design process," I said. He just shook his head. "You should have just gone to trade school with me, bro. HVAC is the future. You'll be chasing fairies while I'm stacking cash." That night, I biked home with his words echoing in my mind. Chasing fairies. Was that all I was doing? Pretending? Still, I stayed up until 3 a.m. sketching out patterns in my notebook. I'd saved up for a second-hand sewing machine from eBay. It rattled like a blender full of rocks, but it worked. The whole extended family was there. Turkey. Mashed potatoes. Passive-aggressive tension. "So, Danny," my Uncle Ray said, slicing into his third helping, "you still playing fashion designer? Or did you finally get a real job?" The table erupted in laughter. Even my dad didn't say anything, just offered a half-smile, eyes fixed on his plate. I swallowed hard. "Actually, I just got my first online order." "From who?" Aunt Valerie asked with a sarcastic tilt of her head. "Your mom?" More laughter. Louder this time. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. But I smiled. And I kept eating. Because I knew something none of them did. I had just shipped a pair of custom denim joggers to a boutique in Chicago. My first wholesale deal. Tiny, but real. A week later, I was behind the counter when Mr. Callahan, the store owner, called me into the back. "Danny," he said, clearing his throat, "I heard you're doing some side sewing thing?" My chest tightened. "Yeah, after hours. It doesn't interfere with." "Listen," he interrupted, "we need focused workers, not distracted artists. You might want to choose." That hit like a slap. I nodded, biting my tongue. That night, I worked overtime and not at the store. I watched YouTube tutorials, learned how to build a Shopify store, and signed up for 2 courses on sustainable textiles. Weeks passed. The mockery didn't stop, but I stopped caring. Sort of. At 3 a.m., staring at fabric samples, the doubts always crept in. What if they're right? What if I'm just some broke dreamer sewing illusions in a shoebox apartment? But then I'd check my inbox and see another order. Another name. Another city. I was stitching my dream together, one order at a time. Until the day everything changed. The weeks that followed that alumni meetup were strange. At first, I thought it was all in my head. But the odd behavior started stacking up like unread notifications I couldn't ignore. It began with the messages. Those old classmates who used to ignore me or laugh behind my back suddenly finding me on LinkedIn and Instagram, even emailing me like we were long-lost friends. The same people who mocked my vision for an independent design business were now commenting things like, "So proud of you," and "Knew you had it in you," under posts they would have ridiculed a year ago. I didn't know whether to laugh, feel flattered, or be suspicious. There was something hollow about their tone, like they weren't congratulating me, they were trying to understand how I'd done it. I began to sense their curiosity wasn't admiration. It was strategic. Then came an even stranger shift. Martin reached out. Yes, Martin Sawyer, the golden boy of our class, the one who used to call my business idea a poor man's Etsy. I hadn't heard from him since graduation, when he made a bet at a party that I'd be back working retail in 6 months. His message read, "Hey, we should grab coffee sometime. Been hearing good things. Want to pick your brain if you're open to it." Pick my brain? I reread that line about 10 times. What did he want? Why now? I didn't respond right away. But the messages kept coming, not just from him. One by one, they began circling me like sharks sensing blood in the water. Claire, who once said I'd never make enough to move out of my parents' house, sent me a voice note. I've been thinking about making a pivot into freelancing. It seems so freeing. You're kind of inspiring me, TBH. She never used to call me inspiring. She used to ask if I'd applied at Target again. Every message was like a brick stacked on my shoulders, not because I felt pressure, but because I started to feel watched. And then, I got invited to speak.
Yes, speak.
At the same university where they'd all laughed when I gave a presentation on the future of independent creative economies. Apparently, my name had been recommended by several alumni for an entrepreneurship panel. They even offered to pay my travel and hotel costs. That's when I knew something was off. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to figure out how I'd done it, how I went from their favorite punchline to someone whose story was now shared in business blogs and magazines. But something about this sudden attention unsettled me more than it flattered me. I couldn't stop overanalyzing everything. Every time my phone buzzed, my first thought wasn't excitement. It was, what do they want now? I started noticing weird little things, too. Someone had shared screenshots of my pricing sheet in a private Facebook group I didn't belong to. A former classmate tagged me on a success story thread on Reddit, without even asking. I found out through a client that 3 of my former peers had contacted her, asking disguised questions about how I worked and what I charged. It wasn't admiration. It was information gathering. And underneath it all, I could feel the tension. They didn't celebrate me because I succeeded. They resented that I had proven them wrong. I brought it up to my best friend Ava over lunch one day. They're sniffing around because they're losing ground, she said, poking at her salad like it was the enemy. You're doing what they couldn't. They're jealous. And maybe a little scared. I wanted to believe it was that simple. But part of me still wondered. Why now? Was something else going on? Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, I got an email from a well-known agency. A big one. They wanted to collaborate on a limited campaign series and said I'd been recommended by multiple sources. When I asked who, they sent me the list. 4 names. 3 of them were people who once laughed in my face. People who said I'd never survive in the real world with just ideas and Canva. The 4th? Martin. My stomach twisted. Why would he recommend me? The agency coordinator confirmed what I feared. Martin was a partner on the project, which meant he would benefit from my work, my ideas, my reputation. I slammed my laptop shut and stared at the wall for almost 15 minutes. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. These people didn't want to lift me up. They wanted to attach themselves to my rise, because they couldn't stand to watch me succeed alone. They weren't laughing anymore, but their silence wasn't respect. It was strategy. I started noticing how much I'd changed. A year ago, I would have jumped at this opportunity because I was still seeking their validation, still hungry for approval. Now, I realized I didn't need them. I never did. I wasn't anxious anymore. I was alert. I started treating every interaction like a business negotiation. No more casual conversations. No more coffee invites. Every outreach got filtered through my assistant, and no one got access to me without a damn good reason. But I also decided to dig deeper. I checked LinkedIn. Several of them had been laid off or were quietly freelancing without much success. Some were trying to launch startups, clumsily mimicking the exact strategies I'd been executing for over a year. It wasn't just ego that fueled their new interest in me. It was survival. Their traditional paths had failed them, and now they wanted to walk mine. But they forgot one thing. They burned that bridge a long time ago. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. I was still watching, collecting, understanding. But the emotional switch had flipped. And the next time Martin called me again, this time directly, I didn't pick up. I let it ring and ring and ring. Then I blocked the number. I wasn't done yet. I was just getting started. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I got the email that changed everything. I was sitting in the tiny co-working space I'd been renting downtown, sipping cold coffee, and revising yet another sales pitch for a new client. The hustle was real, and I was used to it. But the subject line caught my eye. "We'd love to feature your story." It was from a major online business magazine, the kind my old friends used to scroll through while laughing about what delusional people with weird side hustles were trying to do. I clicked it open, heart racing. It was short and direct. "Your growth over the past year has caught the attention of our editorial team. We'd love to do a full feature on your entrepreneurial journey. Can we schedule a Zoom interview this week?" I stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't a small blog or local post. This was national exposure, real recognition. As I reread the email, I felt a strange wave of emotion roll over me. Not joy, not excitement, but a complicated knot of vindication and vulnerability. Because while the magazine was just discovering me now, my former peers, especially Corey, had been there from the beginning laughing.
Corey.
The guy who used to roll his eyes at every weird idea I had. The one who told everyone I was wasting my life when I left the comfort of our stable corporate job to chase what he called a fantasy. "You're not cut out for this," he once told me. "You don't have the personality, the drive, or the business instincts. You're just chasing Instagram quotes." That line still echoed in my mind some days.
But now?
My fantasy had clients in 5 countries. I had 3 full-time staff. And for the first time, my bank account wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Still, I hadn't told anyone from the old world. Not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because part of me still carried the scar of their mockery. Every time I thought about reaching out, I'd remember how they used to smirk when I walked into the room, how they'd cut off my sentences with sarcastic laughs, or how one of them said, "At least someone's brave enough to fail in public." But the world was small. Smaller than I realized. The day the article came out, I was flooded with DMs, reposts, even journalists requesting interviews. But buried among the messages was one that made my heart stop. "Hey, is this the same stupid dream you were talking about back then?"
Wow.
It was Corey.
I didn't respond.
The next message came a few hours later. "I gotta admit, I'm impressed."
Didn't see this coming.
Then came the real kicker. "I'm actually in between roles right now. If you ever need someone with management experience, let me know." That's when the emotional floodgates burst open. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was hollowed out. This man who once mocked everything I stood for, who sat across from me in meeting rooms saying things like, "Just stick to what you're told," now wanted me to give him an opportunity. I closed the messages and just sat there. I remembered every cold coffee I drank alone. Every time I ate ramen for dinner, so I could buy a plugin or software tool. Every time I questioned if they were right, if I really was just a joke. And now here we were. That night, I went through my old journals. I found an entry from 3 years ago. "They laugh now, but someday they'll regret not believing in me. I'll build something too loud for them to ignore." I had. But something deeper shifted inside me. It wasn't just about Corey. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story. Because in mocking me, they planted a seed of doubt. And for years, I watered it. I let their laughter live rent-free in my head. Every failure, every delayed launch, every rejection, I could hear them snickering in my mind. Now I realized they hadn't built anything. They hadn't risked anything. They were safe in their glass offices with predictable paychecks, while I had been building brick by emotional brick, failing upward. And somehow, despite all their noise, I had won. The next day, I walked into my office, a real one now, leased under my name, with my company logo on the wall. My assistant greeted me with a smile. On my desk were 3 new client requests and a speaking invitation from a startup conference. And right there, waiting in my inbox again, was Corey. This time, the subject line read, "Any chance you'd be open to a quick coffee? Would love to reconnect." I hovered over it, finger paused on the mouse. I could delete it. I could ignore him. But instead, I opened the email. It was longer, rambling, awkwardly complimentary. He talked about how things hadn't worked out at his last job, how he always respected my hustle and admired how I turned nothing into something. He ended with, "Let me know if you ever need someone you can trust."
Trust.
The irony twisted like a knife. I closed the email and opened a blank reply. I typed, paused, deleted. Did this need a response? That's when I noticed something else. A message request from Amanda, another former coworker. She used to join in the teasing, snorting at my vision board that I kept on my desk. Her message was simpler. You were right. I wish I'd had the guts to try. That hit differently. Not because it excused the past, but because it revealed what I suspected all along. Their laughter wasn't about me.
It was about them.
Their fear. Their insecurity. Their need to feel superior to avoid confronting their own smallness. That realization was the true moment of truth. They hadn't mocked me because I was foolish. They mocked me because I dared to believe in something they didn't have the courage to reach for. Suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. It all came to a head at the high school reunion. 10 years had passed since I'd walked out of those hallways with nothing but a diploma and a dream everyone thought was ridiculous. I wasn't supposed to make it. Not according to them. Not according to the ones who laughed behind their hands when I said I wanted to build something of my own. But now I arrived in a car they couldn't pronounce, wearing a tailored suit, escorted by my partner, someone they'd seen gracing magazines. The success I had always envisioned wasn't just real. It was undeniable. I could feel their eyes the moment I stepped through the door of the hotel ballroom. The chatter paused for half a second, replaced by whispers. Some were wide-eyed. Others looked away, pretending not to care. But one group stood frozen, them. The ones who had mocked me most.
Derek.
Melissa. Jason. In high school, Derek had been the ringleader of every sarcastic remark. CEO of nothing. He once wrote in my yearbook. Melissa would fake laugh anytime I talked about starting my own design brand, always quick to change the subject to something more realistic. And Jason? He just echoed the chorus. Back then, I thought they had the power to decide who would succeed. Turns out, they only had the power to doubt. As I approached their circle, they scrambled to compose themselves. Well, Derek said, gripping a lukewarm beer. Look who made it out of the garage. There was an edge in his voice, a bitterness he couldn't mask. Actually, I replied with a calm smile. The garage was just the start. But I appreciate the motivation. Melissa blinked quickly. You look different. I am different, I said. Success tends to do that. Jason tried to laugh, but it came out forced.
So, what do you do now?
Still selling sketches online. That was the moment I decided not to downplay a thing. No, I said, meeting each of their eyes. I run a multi-million-dollar creative agency with clients in over 9 countries. Last quarter, we signed a licensing deal worth more than your combined salaries. And my team now includes ex-employees from your current companies. They stood in stunned silence. I let the truth hang in the air, sharp, clean, and deserved. Derek cleared his throat. Money's not everything. True, I said, but dignity is. And for years, I had to build mine back from the scraps you left me with. Melissa stepped forward, trying a different approach. Look, we were kids. We didn't mean any harm. We were just joking. No, you were condescending, I replied. There's a difference. You mocked what you didn't understand because it didn't fit your version of success. Jason frowned. You think we're the bad guys? Come on, we were all trying to survive high school. I chuckled, not out of humor, but disbelief. You didn't just mock my dreams. You made me believe I wasn't enough. I used to lie awake wondering if maybe you were right. A long pause followed. I spent years trying to prove something. I continued. Not just to you, but to myself. That I wasn't the joke you made me out to be. Derek finally snapped, his voice rising. You think you're better than us now? No, I said, my voice steady. I know I'm better than the version of me you tried to create. That's silence again. But this time, something else filled the space. Awareness. For the first time, they looked like they understood what they had done. Maybe not fully, but enough for the cracks to show. Then, unexpectedly, Melissa whispered. We were insecure. Jealous, even. You had something we didn't. Purpose. I looked at her, stunned. Some of us are still trying to figure out what we're even doing, she admitted, eyes cast low. It wasn't a full apology, but it was enough for me to know they were no longer laughing. I took a breath. You want to know what the real dream was? It wasn't the money or the success. It was walking in here tonight, no longer seeking your approval, realizing I never needed it. Jason looked down at his drink. Derek stared off toward the exit. And Melissa just nodded, small, honest, and maybe a little ashamed. As I turned to walk away, I felt something lift off my chest. Years of invisible weight. But just as I reached the ballroom doors, I heard Derek mutter behind me. Still can't believe he made it. I stopped, smiled to myself, and without turning around, I said loud enough for the whole circle to hear. Believe it. And while you're at it, take notes. You might need them if you ever want to work for me. And with that, I walked out, not to escape the past, but to finally own the present. The days that followed weren't what I expected. I had always thought that when I finally made it, I'd feel nothing but joy, like fireworks exploding inside my chest, endless freedom rushing through me. But instead, it felt quiet. Still. Heavy even. The same people who once laughed at my ideas, mocked my little apartment office, my thrift store wardrobe, my impossible ambition, were now either reaching out to congratulate me or watching from a distance, their silence louder than their past insults. My inbox was full of messages from former classmates, ex-coworkers, even old family friends, each with some version of the same thing. Wow, I always knew you'd do something big. Some had the nerve to ask for advice. Others for a job. A few even wanted to reconnect.
I didn't reply.
Not because I was angry, but because I was done explaining myself to people who never bothered to understand me in the first place. I had spent years chasing validation from the wrong crowd, people who only believed in me when I no longer needed them to. The real shock came when I bumped into Logan, the ringleader of the mockery. He was the one who used to tell me my dreams were too soft, that I should do something practical like everyone else. He worked at a mid-level job at a marketing firm now, the same one that had once turned me down. We saw each other at a networking event. I was invited as a keynote speaker. He was part of the organizing team. His expression when he saw me was a cocktail of disbelief, regret, and a pinch of leftover ego. You really pulled it off, huh? He muttered as we shook hands. I smiled, calm, cool, and entirely in control. Yeah, I replied. Turns out dreaming big actually works when you refuse to quit. He nodded slowly, almost as if swallowing something bitter. Guess I was wrong. That's okay, I said, leaning in just slightly. You weren't the only one. Later that night, I stared out the hotel window, watching the city lights blink like memories. I thought of the cold nights I used to spend with my laptop overheating on my knees, my stomach growling because I'd skipped dinner to save money for software subscriptions. I thought of all the jokes people cracked about me behind my back. The pitying looks. The way my parents used to tell people I was still figuring things out, embarrassed to admit what I was really doing.
And now?
Now I had offices in 3 countries. A team of 50. Partnerships with companies I used to worship from afar. I wasn't just succeeding. I was living proof that mockery is fuel when you let it burn the right way. But even with all that, there was a strange hollowness to it. Not regret, just a realization. Success didn't erase the wounds. It just gave me the tools to heal them on my own terms. Still, a part of me wanted closure. So I drove back to my old neighborhood one weekend. I walked down the cracked sidewalk where I used to brainstorm ideas while dodging judgmental neighbors. I paused in front of the rusted gate of my childhood home. I knocked. My mother opened the door, her expression caught somewhere between surprise and guilt. My father hovered behind her, silent. I just wanted to say, I began, thank you, for not believing in me. It taught me how to believe in myself. They didn't respond. They didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. I turned to leave, and just as I stepped off the porch, I caught sight of the old family photo still hanging in the hallway. Me, off to the far left, barely smiling. Forgotten. Unwanted. Ignored. That version of me was gone now. replaced by someone who didn't just chase a dream, but caught it, molded it, and built an empire from its ashes. Weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just one sentence on a torn piece of paper. We didn't believe in you because we couldn't believe in ourselves. I stared at it for a long time, folded it, placed it in the drawer of my desk, and never read it again, because I had moved on. But just as I turned off the lights in my office that night, something strange happened. My phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. It read, "They're planning to take credit for your success. Be careful who you trust." They haven't changed. I froze. Heart pounding. Was this paranoia creeping back in? Was someone watching me? Was Logan involved? Or was there someone else from my past I hadn't seen coming? The line between past and present suddenly blurred. The taste of victory lingered, but beneath it, the faint metallic scent of betrayal still hung in the air. And somewhere, in the shadows of my success, someone was waiting, watching, planning. Final line. The higher I climbed, the clearer I heard their laughter again. Not in my ears, but in the silence that followed, as if success had only just begun to whisper its darkest secret.